All right, let's call to order the Borough Assembly here on May 21st, 2018. Will the clerk call the roll, please?
Mark?
Absent.
Jay?
Here.
Eric?
Here.
Jeff?
Excused.
Nancy?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Brandy? Here.
All right, let us rise for the voluntary pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's see. Approval of minutes. It appears we have no minutes to approve. Moving on, amendment and approval of meeting agenda. Are there any amendments today, or shall I entertain a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, the agenda is approved. Public hearings. Our first one is 18-192, a public hearing for ordinance 2018-13, an ordinance determining that property conveyed to the borough in a tax foreclosure proceeding shall be retained for a public purpose. Is anybody here this evening to testify for this public hearing? Seeing none, the public hearing for that is closed. Which brings us to public hearing B, 18-193, public hearing for ordinance 28-14, an ordinance adopting the budget for the fiscal year July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2019. Is anybody here to testify in regard to that? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Moving us along to bid awards. There are no bid awards this evening, which brings us to visitors' views related to the agenda. Anybody here to speak to visitors' views related to the agenda? Not a lot of takers tonight, fair enough. It'll bring us on to visitors' views unrelated to the agenda. As you come forward, Chelsea, go ahead. State your name, who you represent, and as a reminder, everyone has 5 minutes for testimony, so proceed at your leisure.
Okay, I'm Susan Flint, and I'm representing myself and a small group of concerned citizens regarding the sales tax and the senior exemption.
And I'm Chelsea Tremblay, and as a member of that group, someone with a vested interest in the long-term viability of Petersburg.
Okay, the senior citizen exemption has been a thorny issue for years, mainly because we couldn't find a respectful way to have it become a needs-only basis. So everyone over 65 has just had it. Recently, the Borough came up with a solution that I think is brilliant. Starting July 1st, everyone will pay sales tax. After the first of the year, those seniors receiving assistance of any kind from state or federal, there's a long list of assistance that qualifies, they take their proof to the borough. They then get a refund check from the sales tax fund, a single senior $350 and $450 for a household. We've put before you a similar proposal, and here are some of the reasons that we think this is a good one. Many families now have 2 generations that are eligible for tax exemption, and that leaves young families carrying the burden. And we are fast approaching 600 seniors with tax-exempt cards. As more seniors obtain their tax-exempt cards, sales tax revenues decline. Then Petersburg will see more budget reductions and/or raising of property tax.
So other communities deal with this in different ways. We just mentioned Sitka with the sales tax rebate. As we know, Rheingold does not have a senior citizen sales tax exemption, nor does Skagway or Haines. Juneau has senior exemptions on food and utilities with a rebate for low-income seniors. Ketchikan has a senior sales tax exemption. Also, many more tourist fees that can contribute to their borough economy. So as we start to think about this, and as far as budget terms, it's quite a big issue.
Okay, some of the benefits of using this system is there are no $100 tax-exempt cards that you have to buy every year, no clipboards to sign, no store clerks required to enforce the sales tax rules. We're proposing $400 per senior and $500 per household, as we hear our cost of living is higher than in Sitka. What we're asking for tonight is for an assembly member to sponsor putting our ordinance on the next assembly meeting agenda. And we urge you to approve the ordinance so it can be on the ballot in October for our residents to vote on. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to get Member Mucci on the phone. He's trying to call in, so bear with us for a minute.
Welcome to the GCI Conference Center. Please enter your access code followed by the pound sign. Thank you. Please stand by. If you are the chairperson, press the star key now. Please enter your chairperson passcode, then press pound. You will now be placed into conference. There are 2 participants in the conference.
Member Mucci, can you hear us?
Hi, Jeff is here.
Let me know Member Mucci has arrived. Jeff, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. We are on visitors' views unrelated to the agenda. Just to bring you up to speed. And with that, are there any other visitors' views unrelated to the agenda? Cindy, please proceed.
My name is Cindy Lagodakis. I'm here as a representative of the hospital board this evening, and I was alerted to the fact late in the day that Member Castro had sent a message to Member Whitethorn asking about the tobacco tax and the use of the tobacco tax in the hospital. And I would ask that if you have those kinds of questions in the future, those kinds of actions, the decision on how to use funds, would be something that the board would need to vote on. So we would need a little bit of lead time to at least discuss that issue and come to you with a request or a decision. Having said that, I'm going to, and my apologies to Member Whitethorn, I'm going to read a little bit of her email because she did have some thoughts on this, and they seem to encapsulate pretty well what I think the board would be thinking on this issue. She says, I'm answering based on my thoughts with a bit of input from Board Member Cushing. People who make the tobacco tax possible are people who buy tobacco products. And I should say that this was a query about use of the tobacco tax, if I didn't say that at the outset. The very people who come to the hospital for tobacco-related illnesses, such as cancer, the very people who come to the hospital for tobacco-related illness, such as cancer and heart disease, it stands to reason that at least part of the tax should be allotted to the hospital. PIA has an excellent program to help people stop smoking. I imagine they get state or federal money for this program. While the hospital could introduce a similar program, I don't see that as a wise use of money. We have come to the Assembly in the past year for help in finding ways to secure funding for a much-needed remodel or new build for our aging hospital that Petersburg has outgrown. We will continue our efforts in this area, so my suggestion would be to put that tax in the building fund. And right now, the hospital financially is doing quite well. In fact, it's doing better than it has in the past few years. We, however, still have a deferred maintenance backlog, and there are some systems in the hospital that are at or past their useful life. And we know, we're hoping that we don't have a catastrophic failure in the system, but so far we've been able to address things well. However, we know that there's a need there. We have not moved forward with making a decision about whether we're going to renovate or replace the hospital. That's still a decision that's on the table, and I am sure that's a conversation that we'll have with the new CEO when he comes on board. And we're also looking at realigning and looking at community needs and how we can maybe strategize doing things in more cost-effective ways and broaden our reach as far as meeting the health needs of the community. However, to implement a duplicate tobacco cessation program probably doesn't make sense. I think PIA does that pretty well. The way that the borough is using that money right now, I believe, is just putting it in your own building fund. And it seems like it would be appropriate to make sure that the hospital maintains a healthy and safe and viable facility for the people of Petersburg now and into the future. Are there any questions?
No, thank you.
So, very briefly, and I could state my name again, I'm also here with a brief update on Southeast Conference.
Before we do that, I'm going to do a follow-up with that. Jody, the tobacco money, that goes into the general fund as of now. Is this correct?
Yeah, it goes in the general fund, and the marijuana tax goes into the property development.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarification.
Property development was what I was thinking. Thank you for the clarification.
Proceed.
So just very briefly, Southeast Conference was to have a teleconference last week, and there was not a quorum. However, we have by email approved moving forward on a resolution that will provide an update to our comprehensive economic development strategy, and we are looking at a federal commitment for a federal economic development award to develop that work plan. So I will give a copy to I just blanked on your name, I'm sorry. Mindy, to give to you. And we also have a draft independent contractor agreement for the Renewable Energy Alaska project and Southeast Conference, and we are working as an independent contractor. This is to help energy sufficiency in some of the smaller communities, the target communities being Yakutat, Huna, Angoon, Cake, and Metlakatla. And we are also looking at developing a scope of work for the upcoming year, and our priorities are analyzing local economies, defining economic development goals, and determining project opportunities. The implementation of economic development program detailed in our 5-year comprehensive economic development strategy to reduce unemployment and increase income, to support a consistent and reliable regional multimodal transportation system, to create long-term energy security, to strengthen and promote the maritime economy, to strengthen and promote the visitor industry and to market Alaska to a broader audience, and to support and increase the timber industry workforce and increase the economic timber supply levels and infrastructure. We have other objectives of communications, food security, housing, marketing, solid waste, education, arts, mining, research, cultural wellness, and healthcare. And of course, those things are things that we take advantage of when we have the opportunity to do so. The other items are our priority items. Are there any questions about Southeast Conference activities?
Any questions for Cindy?
All right, I will give a copy of these to Mindy, and she can make copies for you, so you're welcome to look those over. Thank you very much.
Sounds great, thanks. Are there any other views unrelated to the agenda? Ms. Knight, proceed.
Hi, my name is Becky Knight. It's hard to reconcile that the Assembly would even consider harbor rate increases or anything that would have the potential to generate borough income given the recent position on timber sale revenues. I say this because the Assembly recently demonstrated on a 2-2 vote no will to address the nearly $4 million of lost value that originated from 2 local timber sales and is rightfully due local communities in the form of forest stewardship jobs. I ask that the Assembly reconsider sending a resolution to the Inspector General when the full Assembly is available to vote on it. For the members who fail to support even the letter, there is nothing wrong with changing your mind. In the words of Winston Churchill, if you don't change anything, if you don't change your mind, nothing changes. How can the public take seriously the need to generate more income with the Assembly's willful disregard of this huge pot of lost timber value due to illegal high grading, leaving it to someone else and waiting to see how things transpire as Mayor Jensen suggested, sends the message that the formal findings of wrongdoing uncovered in the high-level Forest Service report are perfectly acceptable, and that the timber industry is an untouchable, sacred cow. I note this because you certainly didn't balk on the transboundary mining issue or sea otter issue by leaving action up to Salmon Without Borders or local fishermen and the Native community. What's the difference, I ask? Doesn't local government exist to support the local community? I feel confident that your request for independent review is a perfectly responsible action and is consistent with advice contained in the Forest Service report. There's nothing frivolous or improper about that, and in fact would carry far more weight among agencies and our delegation than a similar request by watchdog organizations who are often routinely ignored. I've said this before. Our delegation, Senator Murkowski in particular, should have our collective back on this. I cannot imagine they would condone the wrongdoing identified in the report, and that they would also want to get to the bottom of it as well as us. And I also question if there's some kind of fear that there'll be some political blowback considering port funding and that kind of stuff. And if that's the case, that's pretty bad. Assemblymember Wallhuter spoke on Borough Business today about the apparent declines in the southeast fishing industry. Those declines take various forms in terms of price as well as abundance. Whether or not the declines are sustained, the Assembly should support the stewardship jobs in the timber projects in these two timber sales. Those are Big Thorn and the Tonka sale. They were initially intended to fund lead pipe repair, and that is culverts that block fish passage, and they can be blocked or perched. I'm sure that Eric can talk even more about that. And an untold number, there was 38 for the Tonka, and I forget how many there were for Big Thorn, but probably quite a few more than the 38 in Tonka, since it was a much smaller timber sale. As a community, we should be supporting these simple measures that would improve fish habitat, so the habitat to support wild salmon populations are there to sustain them whenever that habitat is needed, and that's always. There's nothing controversial or frivolous about that. And coincidentally, today the Whistleblower Service Organization, Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility, or PEER, filed another complaint with the Agriculture Department Inspector General, alleging that the Forest Service Kosciuszko timber sale failed to follow timber sale protocols for that project. If the claims are accurate, and I have every reason to believe this is the case, I'm very familiar with the project, the agency has done nothing to mend its ways. These failures are all the more reason for action by the Assembly. Southeast Alaska communities are the big losers, and inaction should not be an option. And I would say that we lose in three ways. It used to be that under traditional timber sales, monetary receipts went to the Treasury. And they said, no, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to do this these stewardship projects. So now, not only do we lose money from the Treasury, but we lose the timber value in terms of jobs. So that's the second way. And the other way is because of the degraded habitat. And that will go on for generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any other visitors' views unrelated to the agenda? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Sure.
Asked to by Sue if Flint, if one of us would be willing to sponsor this, put it on the next agenda. When would we do that?
Go ahead, Steve.
Not tonight. You can't vote on it tonight. Any one of the Assembly members can make a request to the clerk and ask that it be put on the next agenda.
And more specifically, when is our deadline for that?
Next Monday, so Tuesday with the holiday.
Sound good? Mm-hmm. Roger. Moving on, we have no board, commission, and committee reports. There's nothing on the consent agenda. We have no reports of other officers, which will bring us on to the mayor's report. We are looking for Letters of interest from qualified borough residents to serve our community by filing for one of the vacant seats listed below. We've got one seat in the Public Safety Advisory Board, and this appointment will be in effect until the October 2018 municipal election. In addition, the Historic Preservation Commission has two vacant seats, one for an assembly member representative with a term ending at 12/31/19, and one for an archaeologist or at-large member with a term ending 12/31/20. Letters of interest may be submitted to the Borough Clerk via mail to P.O. Box 329, Petersburg, Alaska 99833, via email to dthompson@petersburgak.gov, or by delivering to the Clerk's office at 12 South Nordic Drive. Mr. Manager, do you have any report for us tonight?
Too many back-to-back meetings, my apologies.
Too many back-to-back meetings indeed. So there's no manager's report, which brings us on to unfinished business. The first one is an ordinance in its second reading. It's ordinance 18-13. An ordinance determining that property conveyed to the borough in a tax foreclosure proceeding shall be retained for public purpose. The background on this is the borough acquired a small lot located at 313 Mitkoff Highway through a tax foreclosure. Due to easements into right-of-way recorded on the lot, along with the location of the property directly fronting Mitkoff Highway, borough staff believe the property is better suited for retention for a public purpose rather than to be included in a land sale. Adoption of ordinance 2018-13 will retain the property for a public purpose. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Member Castro and seconded by Member Morrell. Discussion. Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Aaron.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Kurt.
Yes.
Brandy.
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
And it passes unanimously. Which brings us to the second reading of ordinance 2018-14, an ordinance adopting the budget for fiscal year July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2019. This is the second reading. I would entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
It has been moved by Member Strand and seconded by Member Wilhuter. Discussion. Member Castro.
Yes. Well, just like Cindy ended up bringing up, I have reached out to the hospital board, and I initially had reached out to others within the hospital community, and it just didn't go as far as I needed to in order to be able to come up with a firm plan on how to use this money. But I'd like to propose an amendment, and then we can discuss from there.
Yes, please.
All right, well, I propose that we amend the budget to allocate half of the tobacco tax revenue toward health-related functions in general.
That's the way you'd like to phrase it?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second, not for the sake of discussion.
The amendment has been moved by Member Castro and seconded by Member Morrell. Discussion on the amendment.
Sure.
Member Strand.
I still don't think we should be earmarking any money we take in from a certain designated, like the tobacco tax, to go anywhere but in the general fund, and it can be dispersed from there. But I think it should all start out in the general fund. I can't support this amendment.
Okay. Member Castro.
Sure. Well, so when we voted for this, when Petersburg as a community voted on this, I voted no, because I didn't like that it was going into the general fund. I figured in the effort of transparency that we ought to say where this money is going, because these users the tobacco users are the ones who are bearing the full burden of this tax, and I didn't feel it was appropriate to be able to take tax from a certain user group in town and then just throw it into the general fund. So that's why I didn't vote on it. And actually, my very first meeting 2.5 years ago, the very first ordinance that we had to vote on was devoting it either to half toward the health-related purposes or entirely into the general fund. And I I faltered and I didn't stand up for what I believe about how this could be better used if we were to put it into some sort of a function that would benefit the community in general, and more specifically, tobacco users themselves. The thing is that tobacco use is a high-risk activity that leads to health issues down the road. I think allocating half of the revenue from the tobacco tax toward health-related functions seems like an appropriate use of the money. I would like to see it go into a separate fund that can be set up for future building projects. We all know that this community needs a hospital. We don't know about how we're going to do it. If we're going to spend $33 million on a refurbished hospital or $50 million in a brand new one. But we know that we need money and we don't have enough of it right now. So I would like to see this go into a special fund, not just like the building fund for the hospital that could be used into operating expenses, but something where that if we forget about this thing 4 years down the road, we all of a sudden find nearly $1 million in a special fund that's going to be dedicated toward a new hospital. I feel that would be a great use of this money.
Thank you. Other discussion? Member Ruhlhuter.
I have a question for Jody. Jody, how much does the tobacco tax generate every year?
We're budgeting $230,000 for next year, so half of that would be $115,000.
Okay, so...
And if we did this, we would need to figure out a way of how we're going to balance the general fund budget. Either cut expenses by $115,000 or... Oh, go ahead.
You continue. I'm just going to...
Or increase property taxes, or if you don't want to increase property taxes, you could increase the amount of timber receipt or secure all school funds that we're using for the school. Right now we're using $400, and then the remainder $1.4 million is property taxes that go to the school. We could, change that allocation a little bit more.
Member Castro.
So, a question for Jody again. So, what happened? We ended up with $400,000+ from the secure rural schools that we weren't anticipating when you initially made this budget.
So once we get that payment, which should be any day, we will have about $3.7 million in that fund.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, this year we're using $400,000 of that. And we keep thinking it's going to end, and they keep renewing it. Mm-hmm. But we're just trying to be, as frugal as possible with it. They can use it for operations or capital projects. And, yeah.
Anything further, Member Castro?
Sure. I would like to, I still feel that it would be largely beneficial and open to be able to allow the public to see, this money kind of come to fruition into something tangible. And the general fund is just not something that is like something that you can, as a widget that you can see grow. It is just kind of something there that helps fund ongoing government. So it's necessary. But I feel that since this tax right here is so specific, it's taken from, in the top $3 of each pack of cigarettes, that this could kind of, I feel it's rational to be able to divert half of the funds into something health related.
Roger. Go ahead, Member Strand.
I question the rationality of this. Nobody's holding a gun. I quit smoking. If I can quit, anybody can. And I quit because I didn't like the increasing taxes on each pack. When I quit, a carton of cigarettes was $20. Now it's, I understand, $80 to $100. Any smokers here that can verify this? And many of the health problems caused by smoking they worsen the longer you smoke. So if you've been diagnosed with an illness that's caused by smoking, why are you still smoking? Let's just make it worse. I have a relative who continues to smoke after having put 4 stents into her heart. I don't understand what's the point. She could quit smoking and save that money that would have gone into tax for her health bill.
Indeed, but back to the amendment today. Anything else?
Sorry.
No problem. Anything else, Member Strand?
Nope, we still won't be supporting it.
I have a question for Member Castro. A hang-up I've got with this is health-related purposes. It seems like a really broad palette, so to speak. That can mean anything. Like, so for the sake of argument, and I'm just thinking as I'm going here, how do we decide what happens with that money? Is it sitting in a separate fund, and then someone comes to us, let's say the hospital or whoever, and says, hey, we've got this project that's health-related, and they ask us for that money? Is that... Walk me through the process, I guess is what I'm saying.
No, that makes sense. You're right, that health-related functions or programs is really vague, which is the reason that I was trying to get some more input from the hospital themselves. However, I think they sounds like they suggest putting it into the building fund. I just don't want to make sure that this money doesn't actually go and just kind of go and fill up coffers in a well financially strong organization. I think that there's plenty of needs within the community otherwise, but if we were to be able to allocate this directly into a fund that we could see mature and grow, that, like, say if it were toward the future hospital construction project or something, is kind of more along the lines of the because the vagueness of health-related functions does kind of throw me off as well. Perhaps if the assembly would be willing to allow me to modify that initial amendment, we could put it into a future project construction fund for the hospital.
Before I do that, can I ask you another question, Member Castro? Cool. Something Member Lagodakis was also talking about was never mind setting aside for the time being the long-term vision of a big remodel or a brand new build. Deferred maintenance issues that are ongoing, that could be something that ties into that. A question for the finance director, if that works for you, Jody. Please check me if I'm wrong here, but if I'm following Member Castro's logic, and please cut me off if I'm not, is this seems like it'd be a very appropriate place for the property development fund, wouldn't it? That seems like the umbrella of a pre-existing fund that would fit for those items, would it not? Or am I out of turn here?
It would be a good fit, unless you wanted to use it for other health things and not just the building fund, health and medical. But yeah, I don't see why we couldn't use that money at some point in time further down the road if the hospital were to need it. It would be up to the assembly, but it is a borough building.
One more question, Mr. Mayor. So, thank you, Jody. So walk me through, let's say for the sake of argument, that's a path the assembly chose to go.
Yeah.
And the hospital wanted some of that money for deferred maintenance. What would they need to do?
They would come to the assembly during budget time, before this time, while we're still preparing the budget, and talk to the assembly and say, hey, we would like $50,000 to remodel this room, and so would you consider putting it in the budget? And the assembly would give Steve, the borough manager, direction to do so, and then you can vote on it like you're doing now.
One final question, and I appreciate your patience. So would it be possible to put something like that in the property development fund, following Member Castro's, where he's going with this, to be used for hospital-related functions? Could we put that final point on it inside of there, or is that muddying the waters too much?
You could.
I'm just thinking out loud here.
If you wanted to track it exactly, it'd be easier to create a separate special revenue fund for it.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you, Jody. I appreciate it.
Although, I suppose, if we were to kind of follow in that logic with, tracking where the marijuana excise tax is going and the tobacco excise tax, if we were to allocate them toward the same thing, I wasn't necessarily set on giving it to the hospital. I didn't want it to be used for operating expenses, for deferred maintenance, all those normal operations that an organization has to manage and budget for. I wanted it to go, meant for it to be, used toward something that would benefit the community in the future down the road. As opposed to just something like the general fund. I would be up for moving it to the property development fund because that does it's giving us a big sum of money down the road, both from marijuana and from tobacco that could be used for any purpose within the borough, and would benefit more than just the tobacco users themselves and more than just the hospital. It would benefit every one of us.
So what would you like to do with your amendment, Member Castro? I'm sorry, Member Strand, go ahead.
I have a question. This is morphed into including the marijuana tax now.
No, but point of clarification, Member Castro just making reference to that one, does not include that in the list.
No. Yet. Thank you.
I do not want it that this will not be diverting any money from the property development from the marijuana excise tax. This is speaking specifically toward the tobacco excise tax, and only half of it would end up going toward what I'd like to propose is my new amendment would be...
Good question. Wendy, what do we do here to get rid of the amendment?
Well, we've already got a second on this. I think we need to vote on the amendment that's on the floor, and then...
Make a new amendment afterwards if he so desires. Is that the case?
I think that's the way we should do it.
Fair enough. Member Wilhuter.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Jody, did I hear you that we are currently using that $115,000 to balance the budget?
Yes.
So we have to find other revenue sources, if we were going to try to move this money elsewhere.
Yes, or make tax.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Clerk, call the roll.
Brandy.
No.
Eric.
No.
Jay.
No.
Kurt.
Nope.
Nancy.
No.
Jeff.
No.
All right, the motion fails unanimously. And now we're back to the general motion. Any other amendments or discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Member Lucci, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make an amendment to the budget to bring the museum budget back to its original funding level and come up with the funds to make that happen by taking those funds from the assembly travel budget.
Just to make sure I heard you right, to bring the museum funds up to where it was by taking from the assembly travel budget. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Is there a second?
For the sake of discussion, yes, I'll second that.
The amendment has been made by Member Lucci and seconded by Member Castro. Discussion on the amendment.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Go ahead, Member Lucci.
Thank you. I just brought this up again. I brought it up at the last meeting. I still feel strongly that the museum is an important part of the community. I didn't know if the assembly had heartache with whether the funds were going to come to fund it back to its original level, and I thought maybe a better alternative to have it funded out of the assembly travel budget. So maybe that's more palatable to the assembly. But yep, that's my amendment.
Thank you, Member Lucci. Member Strand, you had a handout?
As much as I think the travel budget is out of line sometimes, I don't agree that, and I love the museum. I would love to see the museum have hundreds of thousands of dollars to operate. But I can't see taking money from one pot and putting it into another. So we're down, what, $2,100? I'll contribute that to balance the museum budget if that's what it'll do, all it will take.
Thank you, Member Strand. Any further discussion on the amendment? Now, just briefly from my own perspective, like I talked about last time, it's $2,100. It's really not much, and I really like Member Michi's idea of us taking from assembly travel to sacrifice for that, but I can't do it only because I feel like this was even-handed at 5% across the board, because then I'm like, okay, cool, let's get KFSK this money, and you do this, and it becomes an endless rabbit hole where, although I don't like this situation, I feel like at least it's fair, so I won't be able to vote for this amendment. Any further discussion on the amendment? Clerk, call the roll on the amendment, please.
Jeff?
Yes.
Nancy?
No.
Kurt?
No.
Jay?
No.
Eric?
No.
Randy?
No.
The amendment fails with member Nietzsche voting for and the rest against. Back to the main motion of the budget. Any further discussion / amendments? Member Woolhooter.
I've been wrestling with this, and did you have something to say, Jeff?
I'm here.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe you were going to add something there. I know how difficult it is to be on the phone and try to be in turn, so. I've been wrestling with this, and there seems to be a lot of confusion in the public what this placeholder for $2,000 for department heads is all about. And it just seems to me, until we settle the PMEAA, a negotiation settlement, I would like to set that aside right now and take that out of the budget, and then bring it up later on after we've settled all these other negotiations with these other departments, as a supplementary budget later on in the year once we see how things shake out.
So can you put that in the form of a motion, please, Member Woolhooter?
Okay, I'd like to just temporarily set aside that $2,000 placeholders, for the department heads until, we settle the other agreements, with the other unions.
So just to clarify, temporarily means with an intention of bringing it back up.
Yes. But right now, I think I just want to set it aside so it's not so confusing with our negotiating with these other unions, because right now seems to be a lot of confusion with the public on what's going on with that money, so.
And are we able to take that as a motion with the vagueness of it, or do we need to put a finer point on it just to remove it?
But you can help me out, yeah.
May I?
Yes, please, Mr. Manager.
Since we're talking about the budget here, the easiest thing would be to remove it and use the word supplemental budget. And, that's a mechanism that we could use to bring it back to you later. So the cleanest would be to say, you want that removed from the budget.
Okay, I'll rephrase it then. I'd like that placeholder removed from the budget as for now.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
An amendment to remove the $2,000 placeholders for department heads. To remove that from the budget has been moved by Member Woolhooter and seconded by Member Morall. Discussion on the amendment. Member Strand.
Do we go back to the first reading then, or do we continue with the...
No, that we'll be proceeding accordingly. The next reading will still be the third reading. Good clarifier. Any further discussion on the amendment?
Just to clarify my point is that I don't mean any disrespect for the department heads, but I just think it would kind of clean things up a little bit, until we get these other union negotiations clarified. So that's the reason I'm presenting that as a proposal.
Thank you, sir. That's my own 2 cents I'll offer on this one is I won't be voting for this amendment, not because I don't think Member Woolhooter has a valid point right there, but I actually like it because it is a placeholder, and this isn't something that's like the checks are written, it's going to be happening. So based on budgetary availability. I won't rehash. You've talked about, Steve, your matrix for deciding working on salaries for both staff, or general borough employees, and for department heads. A one-time thing is not a long-term salary. What's the word I'm looking for? That's something you have to deal with yearly. Anyway, I like it as a placeholder. That's a selling point for me. So because it might not be able to happen. So I won't be voting for the amendment. Any further discussion on the amendment? Member Castro.
Sure. Yeah, just a point of clarification from Jody. So if we were to strike this from the budget right now, would those funds set aside right now for department heads, would they sit there at all, or would that be redistributed to the general fund? I guess right now, if we're saving those placeholders for up to $2,000 for each department head, would we have something set aside for a number of department heads times $2,000 in the budget, or would that just be...
It'll just go into reserves, so there'll be a little bit more of a surplus budgeted than there is right now.
Okay.
In the general fund.
Anything else, Member Castro? Any further discussion on the amendment? right. Will the clerk call the roll on the amendment, please?
Could you read the amendment one more time from?
Of course. Wendy, read it, please.
To remove the $2,000 placeholder for department heads from the budget.
Clear? Mm-hmm. All right. Will the clerk call the roll, please?
Nancy.
No.
Jeff.
No.
Kurt.
Yes.
Eric.
No.
Jay.
No.
Brandy.
Yes.
The amendment fails 2-4, with members Wolhuter and Morrell voting for. Bringing us back again to the main motion of the 2018 budget. Any further discussion/amendments?
I have a question.
Please, Member Morrell, go ahead.
I would like more explanation on the need for nearly 18.5, nearly $20,000 for cleaning for the Parks and Rec. Does anyone hear that? Know about that?
Yeah, we spoke to that briefly last time. Steve, do you feel comfortable speaking of that topic today? If I'm remembering right, you touched on that at one point with cleaning services. Is that?
Sorry.
If I even have it right.
Jody, please jump in if I miss this. Parks and Rec, for the longest time, we used to have a paid custodian. We got rid of that position and we moved the cleaning job to the actual facility attendants who work at Parks and Rec. So them and the lifeguards are currently responsible for cleaning. Unfortunately, we're seeing that they cannot do their job, which is greeting people coming and going, and keep the facility as clean as what people would like. So we're seeing basically the cleanliness aspect isn't there. So the professional services line there was to actually hire, like we do for all the other borough facilities, actually having a cleaner come in and do. So we do that in pretty much every facility. We have a cleaner come in. So we'll be doing the same at Parks and Rec.
And just to add on to that, it also, it looks like includes Riptide. I think they come in and he has a powerful washer to like spray down the shower a couple times a year, to get the grime off, and that's about all I know.
Morrell, proceed.
Well, I just know that, long before, they used to be able to keep up and clean the facilities. Has there been anything looked into maybe changing, doing some difference with scheduling so that there's more overlap, so that, some other way that you're not spending nearly $20,000 on cleaning? I think that could be maybe a different way so that we're not spending quite so much money.
I want to defer to Chandra, who's not here. We didn't realize.
Maybe I need to ask that at a later date.
One of the things, and again, I don't want to discount your question, I guess is my point. Our staffing, particularly at Parks and Rec, if I was going to go down the road, how about we approach it that way? If I was going to try to do what you're talking about, and again, this is dangerous because Chandra's not here to tell me I'm off base, would be to shorten the hours that we're open to the public. Either close a day or shorten those hours so that folks don't have to be trying to help customers as they walk in the door at the same time having to clean the showers. That's where we run into problems where our staffing, for the most part, is just one person manning the front desk. If that person is also responsible for cleaning, it's hard for them to go to the locker rooms, especially if they're male or female and they're trying to clean the other locker room or run upstairs to wipe equipment down. It's hard for them to do that and still man the front desk. So traditionally what's been happening is the cleaning itself has been going on, basically after they close, and we try to keep overtime at a minimum. They're only doing it for about 30 minutes. And that's not enough to keep that facility clean, especially during the day when you have the locker rooms getting kind of as grungy as they get. So, but again, back to your point, I don't want to speak for Chandra if she's considered those options, and she may or may not have. But I would say the first guess would be shorten the hours, either close a full day and do a big cleaning with the existing employees, or shrink the hours down so that we're only open so many hours, and then that extra time the people could be cleaning. We'd still be paying them, but they'd be cleaning then rather than doing washing the front desk.
Mr. Manager, Would that be similar to when, let's say, several years back, the facility was closed from noon to 3? I imagine they were doing more non-customer service-related things like cleaning, et cetera.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we did, and that was very unpopular with folks.
Of course, reductions in services generally are.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think you're hearing
Doesn't mean you couldn't go back.
Well, I know that, like, when I was younger, the lifeguards used to clean the shower lockers after their shift, and so they weren't taking away from that front desk person. I'm just asking if there's been alternate, that's a large chunk of money, I feel like, to spend on something that has worked in the past, so.
We're hearing from the public it's not working currently, but to your point, I can't answer. I mean, we need to have Chandler come in.
Any further discussion on the main motion of the budget?
Just
proceed, Mr. Manager, yes.
Sorry, we never resolved the tobacco tax thing. I'm not trying to stir trouble up, but okay.
Well, thank you. Yeah, on that note, I think I'm going to wait until I get my little more clear direction.
Thank you for the clarifier, Mr. Manager. Member Mucci, anything else you'd like to add before we call the roll here?
No, thank you.
All right, with that, will our clerk call the roll on the second reading of the budget?
Okay. Brandy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
And the second reading of the budget passes unanimously in its second reading. Yep. So moving on to, bear with me here, new business. Yep. Ordinance 18-15, an ordinance amending Petersburg Municipal Code, Chapter 14.20, entitled Municipal Harbors to increase harbor fees. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
Motion has been made by Member Wolhuter and seconded by Member Strand. And just for those listening at home, the Petersburg Waterfront Master Plan, adopted along with the Borough's Comprehensive Plan in March of 2016, they recommended an across-the-board increase of 12% to harbor moorage and use fees to bring harbor revenues in line with costs. To accomplish this goal, a 10% prepayment provision was eliminated with the adoption of Ordinance 2017-03. Moorage rates will increase by approximately 9%, and most other harbor fees will increase by approximately 12% effectively July 1st, 2018 with the adoption of this ordinance. Discussion.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Member Yuchi.
Thank you. Hey, I just run through the Harbor Advisory Board. It probably has, but just for members of the public, just checking to see if it's gone through the Harbor Board.
Member Wolhuter, can you speak to that perchance? Not to put you on the spot, of course, but...
Yeah, I can probably be pretty safe for certain that this has already cleared the Harbor Board, and it's their recommendation.
Anything further on that, Member Mucci?
Nope, if that's the case, I'm fine with it.
Thank you, sir. Any further discussion? Will the clerk call the roll?
Jay?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes. Passes unanimously. Which brings us on to 18-195, titled Goldeneye Subdivision. I'll read it first, I guess. The Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority has platted the Goldeneye Subdivision located near the corner of Mitkoff Highway and Papke's Landing Road. DNR requires municipalities accept easements and right-of-ways for public uses and for public purposes, and is requesting Mayor Jensen sign the plat stating such. The acceptance language specifically states that there is no obligation of the borough to construct, operate, or maintain improvements to this subdivision. Some of the lots in the subdivision do not have access from either Mitkoff Highway or Papke's Landing Road. None of the lots have available utilities provided. If the subdivision were within Service Area 1, the borough would require the developer to construct access and provide available utilities to the lots they are offering for sale. The Goldeneye subdivision is outside of Service Area 1, and currently platting authority for all borough lands outside of Service Area 1 is that of DNR. A draft letter requesting full disclosure regarding the access and utilities to the lots is included in the packet for the assembly to consider. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Second. It's been moved by Member Wohlhuter and seconded by Member Strand. Discussion. If no one's going to speak, I'll offer something here first. For myself, I like that this disclaimer is being put in there so people know what they're getting into. Having personally bought mental health trust land on Cooper enough before, I might be speculating here. It seems like it was written and platted like the same as those, not really thinking about road system things and taking into account that I simply put the idea of really letting people know what they're getting into so that down the line, someone buys this lot and then comes to, calls up Chris Cotta and, complains they don't have utilities or whatnot. They don't have that card to play because it's been very clearly stated. I think it's really important and respectful of potential buyers. So I like that language was added in there, and I'll definitely be voting for this. Any further discussion? Anything you want to add, Mr. Manager? I saw you had your hand out there before.
No, this is an ongoing discussion issue with mental health. We want this added if we can get them to do it so that kind of there's no buyer beware situation going on. Unfortunately, folks kind of miss this stuff sometimes. In the first place they come to complain is power and light, or say, well, why can't I get power? The poles are right there, and so we kind of wanted to put some of this back on mental health and say, hey, just put this in your advertisement so when these lots are sold, people hopefully will read it and they know what they're getting into. That it's not just the cost of the lot, it's going to be the cost of having to get with their neighbors and build a road if they want to have utility service.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Member Strand, you had your hand up?
This is just to send a letter to mental health, the Mental Health Trust, requesting that they put this into their deed description or whatever it's called.
Correct, and accepting the platting. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any further discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Jay?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
And it passes unanimously. Which brings us to communications. There are no assembly discussion items that were put on the agenda today. So are there any recognitions? Member Castro.
Yes. I'd like to recognize the Petersburg Arts Council for sponsoring such an outstanding hootenanny with the Ratfish Wranglers last night at Sons of Norway. Saturday night. It was an amazing show with folks 21 to 71 up there just cutting a rug. They initially didn't have enough seating, and then what we turned out is there was too much seating and not enough room for dancing. So it was a really great show, and thank you for the Arts Council for putting that on.
Thanks, Member Castro. Member Morrell.
I'd like to give recognition to everyone involved with the Little Norway Festival. I thought it was one of the best that we've had
Absolutely.
in years.
Yeah, you bet. Any other recognitions? Sandy, I see you waving at me in the back. Go ahead.
Sandy Dixon, Fire EMS Director, and I just want to point out that it's EMS Appreciation Week, so if you happen to see a Petersburg Volunteer Fire Department EMS member, you would recognize them. That would be greatly appreciated.
Well, in that case, since I'm looking at you right now, thank you so much for your service and your efforts. Any other recognitions? In that case, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. It is adjourned.